Welcome to today's program, and we have a very special guest. Her name is Andrea Logan White. Well, welcome to the program, Andrea.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Now, take us back to your early life. You mentioned that you had a pretty dysfunctional family. Where were you raised, Andrea? And tell us a bit about this dysfunction.
Sure. Well, I was raised in a small town outside of Chicago, Burlington, Illinois. So I grew up in cornfields and grew up with two brothers. And, you know, I was bullied by my brothers. My parents divorced when I was a teenager. Both my grandparents died. So I had this immense amount of emptiness and grief and loss. And I started to search for love in all the wrong places. I experimented with drugs and alcohol when I was a young teenager and dated boys. And, you know, I was an athlete, but I just felt like I was never enough in anybody's eyes. And so, you know, the self-destructive behavior, my mom had moved away when I was in high school. So, and my dad worked for the government and he was a cop. And so I pretty much raised myself and my younger brother. And when you don't have guidance and you're a teenager, well, you do everything that you do and that you think that will bring you happiness. And so that led to eating disorders and anorexia because it was a way to control the things that were happening to me. I couldn't control anybody else abandoning me, leaving me, and so I could control food, and that led to a destructive path of near death. And that's just part of my story. Scary thing about any addiction or eating disorders is that you're so enthralled in it that you don't realize that you are literally knocking on death's door. I knew that I was thin, but when I looked in the mirror, I saw a fat person. And so that's the deception of addiction and self-destructive behavior, because I didn't realize how close to death I really was.
Wow. What happened to you exactly? Because obviously you were heading for real trouble. Then you found the Lord. Was that after you moved to Southern California?
Well, I wish I could say it was that easy. I moved to California with my father and got the acting bug when I was in community college. So I spent the first 6 months in California in bed, you know, barely being able to walk, and slowly got stronger to go to school and to get into a theater class down in San Diego. And then that led me to some modeling and to auditioning, and that then I was introduced to the Playboy Mansion, which that's the twist and the turn. So I had a few years of, you know, what do I want to say? Living everything opposite the way that God has called us to live. And so that was a few years of that before I really hit my face on the ground and cried out to God and found the Lord through, again, another near-death experience. So God is faithful. But, yes, I met David at church, and I just wanted nothing but God and his word. And so I would go to church and sit in the last row in the last seat and just want to hear his word, and would run away from boys. I was like, Lord, I want nothing to do with men. I just want to know you and to just, you know, live my life the way that you've called us to live it. And so we met in about 2002, David and I, and then, no, I'm sorry, we met a year or two before that, but then within a year and a day of dating, we married in 2003. So almost 15 years later and 3 children.
How did you share with him, you know, the eating disorder that you had?
Well, and that's another big part of my story is when we come to know the Lord, we think that our old life is old and we are new creatures in Christ, but the new creature sometimes takes time to be transformed. And for me, I had many emotional wounds and many wounds that God is still healing to this day. But, you know, I was free from the anorexia, but shortly after David and I started dating and I was still a baby Christian, well, bulimia kicked in. So then the eating disorder changed, and then, you know, it morphed into bulimia. And because that was all I knew. All I knew was to control something. And so that was very hard to tell him, but I was not afraid to tell him. It was just something that I think myself ashamed of, because I questioned, okay, now I know God. I'm going to church. I'm going to Bible study. I'm reading his word. I'm praying. And now I'm still killing myself, literally. And so that was a few years until it took to the point of crying out to God for a few years and me conceiving a child, my son, who's now 11 and a half, that I said, okay, I can harm myself, but I will not harm this unborn child. And that really was God's faithfulness. Again, God's hand and protection on my life to say, nope, you're not done yet. And so, we're all on a journey, but it's definitely something that I want people to know that they, not to give up and to not lose hope, because God will somehow bless us in the midst of our storms.
I was reading a story that we ran on my news service a little time ago about your book, and it said here that Hugh Hefner once provided a limo ride for you to church. Tell us about that. That's so bizarre.
Isn't that funny? So my introduction, like I said, to L.A. was going to the Playboy Mansion. A commercial agent invited me. So here I'm 19 years old, and I drive up to the Playboy Mansion. I was invited. You have to turn in your headshot to even get on the list. And so within the first few minutes of me entering the Playboy Mansion with Leonardo DiCaprio and George Clooney and all these celebrities, and was Hef's main girlfriend. And within the first 15 minutes of me arriving, she came up to me and introduced herself. And then that's how I moved to L.A. was I shared a home with her in North Hollywood. So Hef was dating her, and our first acting teacher, we'd get up and do our scenes in acting, and this man, he was Bobby Garabedian, who's a friend of ours still, he would just weep. And I was like, wow, that's strange. Well, he happened to be a Christian, and he invited us to his church, which was Malibu Vineyard at the time. And so Brandy said, hey, Hef, who was Jewish, she said, can we go to church? And so he provided a limo and picked us up at our home in North Hollywood and took us to church.
Did you ever get a chance to talk to him one-to-one, or was it usually he was just surrounded by everybody?
No, I kind of was part of the family for a good couple years, where I would go every week and have dinners and Sunday dinners and movie night, and he had all his week mapped out with all of his friends, and so I was part of the little crew. Funny enough, he was always very gentle. He was a gentleman to me. There just wasn't anything perverted in our relationship that I had with him. And so he would say, if you want to pose for Playboy, you have to gain weight. And he was, oddly enough, a little bit of a father figure in that moment in time in my life when I really didn't have any support or strong people that could help me in my life. He was, in a weird way, a father figure.
So you mentioned earlier, Andrea, that you had finally become a believer. How and where did that happen?
Well, it's in my book. It's called The Stoplight Moment. And in a nutshell, I was at the end of my rope. I was partying in Hollywood, dating multiple men, auditioning, working multiple jobs. Some of them were compromising to my morals even before I was a Christian. And I cried out to God one night when I lost my will and purpose. And I said, I don't know why I'm here. And God, if you're real, you need to show me who you are, because I've lost my will to live and I don't want to live anymore. And this car beeped their horn at the stoplight, pointed to the radio station, and this man held up a sign, and it was the radio station. He drives away. The bumper sticker says, Jesus loves you. And it was the pastor on the radio repeating the words that I just cried out to God. So for me, that was a huge sign that God was real. And not only was he real, but he really does have a plan for our life and a purpose, even in the midst of not being able to see. And that was kind of what got me on the straight and narrow and led me back to church and getting saved. I didn't even know what it meant to be saved, but I just knew that I had to go to church. And God is so good. The Holy Spirit is gentle, and so he works in mysterious ways.
What happened to your dad, by the way?
My real dad?
Yeah. So
he still lives in down near San Diego, and so he never remarried. I'm close with my father, and he remains a big part of my life, and he is a big supporter, and so we're very close. But he's still around, and God uses everything. So when I became a Christian, I did say, okay, God, if this is something that you've called me to do, you literally have to put it in my lap, because this is, how can you be a Christian in Acts? There's so many compromising roles. And so that's when I met David, and then we started working together on projects.
So you did Mum's Night Out, I believe. Tell us about that one.
That's a comedy. We did that with Patricia Heaton, Trace Adkins, Sarah Drew, Sean Astin, Robert Amaya. Great cast, and it's a comedy. And David and I developed the concept with the writer Andrea Logan, who's a great writer, friend of ours, and we just often develop many of our scripts and projects when we're raising our children in the midst of trying to juggle everything in life, and we thought it would be really fun to put comedy to the suffering of what moms and dads and parents go through trying to raise their children. And so, a lot of healing that I've gone through with my life, that God has used humor to kind of heal me through the hard times. So we wanted to just share that with everybody else.
And you did another one called Do You Believe with Sean Astin. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's a film. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie Crash, but it's different lives in different circumstances that really struggle with their faith and going through life and trying to figure out why we go through heartache and pain and loss and grief and why God allows those things. And the end of the movie, we all come together in, I guess if you want to call it serendipity, but in a painful way, we are all brought together and really, come to our faith. And at the end of the day, when we are on our deathbed, who do we turn to? And, where are we going? Where are we going after this earthly life ends? So a lot of inspiration and encouragement to help others to kind of question their own faith.
We're talking with Andrea Logan White, who has just released a book called Perfectly Unfinished, a great title, Finding Beauty in the Midst of Brokenness, Zondervan. Now, Pureflix, I'm fascinated. When I was younger, Andrea, and lived in England, my dad was a pastor. And he had a motto, which was, you name it, I'm against it. And he was particularly against movies. He couldn't understand, and he would not let me go to see movies because he said, they're of the devil. And many Christians also have been very critical of Hollywood and all the past. But how on earth did Pureflix evolve, and what was your role in it?
That's an interesting story. My husband grew up very similar. He grew up part of his life Mennonite, so they couldn't go to movies, they couldn't dance, they couldn't do any of that. And so after he did his year of Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, he told his dad that he was going to go to Hollywood and be an actor. And so that was kind of a shock to his family. But it really, he started doing a bunch of Christian films and also did mainstream acting out in Hollywood, but did not want to be an out-of-work actor and wait for people to hire him. So he started producing his own films in the mid-'90s with another friend and Christian actor. And so that spawned a few years of that. And then in 2005, we founded Pureflix with a few other partners. And our goal was to just put faith-based content that could reach other people and also pay the investors back. So we started with straight to DVDs, and now a few years ago we've been doing theatricals for about 5+ years, and so we also do films that are released in movie theaters nationwide. And then 2.5 years ago we launched Pureflix.com, which is just like Netflix, so it's on any smart TV or any app on your phone, and we do thousands of television shows, children's shows, movies, TV series that we can just give families and people an alternative to things that aren't compromising, and you can kind of watch with your whole family, and that are pure in content for everybody.
I remember many years ago going to CBN, and they had just launched their first Christian soap opera. And I went with a team of media friends from England. We were over on a trip then, and they showed us this episode, and then the guy who was showing it turned to us and said, well, what did you think of that? And one of my friends, his name was Norman Stone. He did the BBC version of the C.S. Lewis film, with Joy Davidson. And he said, that's the worst piece of drama I've ever seen. Because, John 3:16 was every other word there, and it was just terrible. How have you guarded in Pureflix from, preaching the gospel so overtly that non-Christians would be turned off?
Great question. Well, a few things. Everything that we do is not hit yourself over your head with gospel, and so we have a lot of content that's not super preachy, and then we also have very strong gospel-driven films, but they're all faith-based because everybody is at a certain place in their faith where they might not be ready to just get preached at, and so Obviously, our goal is to do quality films that encourage, inspire the human spirit, and lead people towards God. But we do actually, believe it or not, have a soap opera on pureflix.com called Hilton Head Island. And then we also have a show that's called Hitting the Brakes, which is a comedy, and we just released January 5th that David and I are in called Malibu Day and the Family Man, which is a lighthearted comedy with faith in it. So we have kind of a little bit of everything for everyone, because not everybody wants to be preached at all the time. And so you can't get anybody to go to church. A lot of times people don't want to go to church, but you can often get people to watch something on TV or go to a movie theater. So that's our hope, is to create that content.
Now, what's ahead for you? Are you going to Do You Believe 2? Is that in the works?
Well, that would be fun, as well as everybody's always asking us when we're doing Mom's Night Out too. So, I'm set to do a film. I can't announce the name yet, but within the end of this month, I'm scheduled to head to Kentucky to do a film. That's going to be fun. And God's Not Dead. David just finished the third one in that, called A Light in the Darkness. That will come out around Easter. So we have a lot of fun things in the pipeline, as well as doing kind of a season 2 for Malibu Day and the Family Man. So you can keep up with all of that on pureflix.com or any of our social media pages to kind of see what we're doing. But we're always, by the grace of God, enjoying what we do, and God willing, just being led by His Spirit.
Well, we're speaking with Andrea Logan White. Andrea, I'm very interested in how this all works. The reason I say that is that a Hollywood screenwriter is writing my own life story. I was born in Africa, raised in Britain, worked in the tabloids, worked for the National Enquirer, found the Lord in a drunken stupor in London, and now work particularly on behalf of persecuted Christians. And I'm reading the screenplay at the moment, and it's just so amazing, the talent of the screenwriter to turn these, these things that happened into a really interesting thing. Do you do screenwriting yourself?
Well, if I didn't sleep at night, I would. But writing my book, raising 3 children, and writing my book, it's funny because one of our favorite things David and I love to do is to develop scripts and concepts for films and for television. So we do develop them, we fine-tune them, but we have a team of writers that we hire, and quite honestly, we're just, there's not enough time to direct and act and write books and raise children and also stay, in the Word and go to church. So that's one of the things. Someday I might come across that, but right now I try to balance it, and I have plenty on my plate. But yeah,
I don't know.
Right? It's fascinating though to be able to do it all.
Well, see, I've done a few books in my time, and writing books is so different to screenwriting because a lot of the action has to take place on the screen, where in a book you have to spell it out. And
right.
Did you find it hard to do? I mean, doing movie stuff. Did you find it hard to have to fill in the blanks, as it were, in your book?
Yes. In fact, it's writing and making films and acting is so very different because, like you said it perfectly. You have to spell it out. And the other thing is interesting is that you're writing. I would often write 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. after my kids went to bed. So one, you're alone, and you're trying to visualize this all in your head, which is similar as an actor, but you can actually work out the scenes on screen when you're doing a film or doing television. And the other thing with writing that I found is that you don't get instant gratification. So you don't know if something's working or not, other than feeling like intuitively that it's flowing. But it's similar, and funny enough, I'd love to put my book into a screenplay God willing, someday, because I just love the art of movie making, but also I love reading and writing as well, because your imagination kind of takes over.
We've been speaking with Andrea Logan White, and I would recommend that you rush out and get this book, Perfectly Unfinished, Finding Beauty in the Midst of Brokenness. Now, Andrea, coming from Britain, British people don't really share their inside problems. You know, they believe it's private and shouldn't happen. When we moved to America, we couldn't believe how people were so open. You know, you'd be standing in a supermarket line and somebody'd stand next to you and you'd say, "Hi, how you doing?" And they'd say, "I was molested when I was 3. And you think, dear, oh dear, I couldn't get over that. Why are Americans so open about their backgrounds?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think it's a cultural thing. I mean, I think it just has to do with our culture. And it's funny because I don't think I've ever been asked that question, but so many Americans live away from their families. So partially, I think it's something like they just need to let it out, because most families don't live together anymore. Like other countries, the family, the grandparents, the aunts and the uncles, we all live together. They all share. But in America, we're all so separate. I mean, my mom lives in Indiana. I'm in California. I see her, maybe twice a year. So I think part of it is just the need to share, because we're often isolated,
Right. Well, if people would like to get a copy of the book, I hope you will get it. You just go to Zondervan Publishers, www.zondervan.com/perfectly-unfinished, and you can get a copy of the book. When people have read it, Andrea, what do you want them to take away?
Just, that God is there through the dark times, through the storms, even though we may pray for, it seems like, years and have unanswered prayers, but God really will use all of these storms to shine his light through them. And, don't give up. Don't throw in the towel. I often relate to people that are struggling more than the beautiful person sitting in the front row of the church pew, because I love transparency. I love people that are real, and it's okay to not have it all together, because really we will never arrive until we meet Jesus in heaven. And so, we're all on this journey trying to serve God, and it's painful, but I just encourage people to not give up, that there is hope, that God is faithful, and he loves you, and I love you.
Well, I just want to say a big thank you to Andrea. Karen Carpenter, unfortunately, I think it took her life. And, that has taken many, many lives. And I'm so thrilled that you were rescued. And I just wish you every success with the book and also with the movie company. So, Andrea, thank you so much.